Captain Ryan Mercer of the United States Marine Corps had never met a situation he couldn't joke his way through. Ambushes, inspections, stuck convoys. He handled everything with a grin that walked a perfect line between charming and infuriating. Which was why, during the joint Forces Readiness drill, he walked across the motor pool with the swagger of a man who believed the entire base existed purely for his entertainment. Engines rumbled, Marines yelled. A dozen branches mixed, each group easily spotted by uniforms, patches, and the way they carried themselves. But one person stood out instantly. A woman in a dark flight jacket leaned against a dusty Humvee like she'd been born there. She wasn't wearing a flight suit or fatigues, just jeans and boots, but somehow she looked like she had more authority than half the officers present. Her aviator sunglasses reflected the bright afternoon sun, turning her unreadable. She casually flipped through a maintenance logbook, pen tapping against her thumb in steady rhythm. Ryan slowed as he approached, curiosity immediately piqued. Most pilots looked like they were constantly calculating something, but this woman looked like she was simply waiting, calm, comfortable, completely unbothered by the chaotic base around her. He couldn't resist. "You look like aircrew," he said, planting himself in front of her with that signature Mercer half-smile. "So what's your call sign?" She didn't look up, didn't even acknowledge him for the first few seconds. She kept reading, flipping another page like he hadn't spoken. Finally, without lifting her head, she said, "You don't want to know." Oh, that only made him more interested. "Come on," Ryan insisted, hands sliding into his pockets. "Everyone's got one, Viper, Blaze, Angel, something dramatic." Now she did look up, slowly, her sunglasses angled just enough that he saw himself reflected in them. He suddenly felt like he was being evaluated by someone who had already figured out far too much about him. "Nope," she said flatly, "nothing like that." He flashed a grin that had gotten him into trouble on every base from Okinawa to Pendleton. "Try me." She closed the logbook with a soft thwap, the sound sharp enough to make him straighten a little. "Sticky 6, she said. Ryan's smirk froze in place. His brain stuttered. For a second, he wasn't sure he heard right. "Sticky 6, he repeated, voice cracking just slightly. She nodded once, expression unreadable. It hit him like a flashbang. Sticky 6 wasn't just a call sign. It was a name carried around military circles with a mix of awe, fear, and respect. Marine infantry whispered it when talking about pilots who'd saved their skins. Air Force brass used it in debriefs as an example of how far a pilot could push a dying aircraft. Her legend was practically required reading in certain units. She was that pilot. The A-10 driver who had flown through a nightmare over Alcara Ridge, where a fireteam of Marines had been pinned down in a kill box. Backup had been hours away. The ridge was lost. Everyone had written those Marines off, except one woman who'd flown into the teeth of enemy fire with half her controls shot out, hydraulics gone, alarms screaming, and fuel spraying from a ruptured line. She'd held the Warthog in the sky through sheer skill and something bordering on insanity. She strafed the ridge so precisely that the surviving Marines swore she must have been reading their thoughts. The aircraft limped back with smoke trailing and a wheel missing. Pilots called it impossible. Ryan stared like he was looking at a ghost wrapped in leather and denim. "You're Sticky 6, he finally managed. She shrugged lightly. Sometimes, the casual way she said it, the absolute lack of showmanship, made it even worse, or better. He hadn't decided. He blinked. "You saved those Marines in Syria with a half-dead bird. You're still here," she said, snapping her fingers. "Focus, Captain." For the first time in a long military career filled with chaos, danger, and things that made normal people faint, Captain Ryan Mercer felt completely, overwhelmingly outmatched, and not by an enemy, but by a woman who hadn't even bothered to take off her sunglasses, and he realized in that moment that he had not just stepped into a conversation, he had stepped directly into a legendary story, and she was the kind who controlled every chapter. Ryan Mercer prided himself on staying composed under pressure, but walking beside Sticky Six, the Sticky Six composure felt like a distant mythical creature. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to salute her, apologize to her, or simply accept that the universe had played a practical joke on him. She didn't seem bothered at all. If anything, she looked amused. She tucked the maintenance log under her arm and started walking toward the tarmac, boots crunching on gravel. Ryan followed, still reeling. "That was you," he said again, as if repeating it would help. "You were the pilot from Alcara Ridge, last I checked." She replied casually, "Yeah." He scrubbed a hand across the back of his neck. "I thought that story was exaggerated." She shot him a sidelong look. "Parts of it are. The part where they say I flew the A-10 after losing the entire left wing. Yet no, still had half of it." He stared. "That's the part you think is exaggerated." Her mouth twitched into the faintest smile. People like to add flair. They reached the tarmac, and the hot pavement radiated waves of heat. The row of A-10 warthogs gleamed under the sun like metal predators resting between hunts. One of them still had fresh maintenance markings near its nose, likely her bird, and for the first time Ryan saw something change in her expression. Her posture softened, her steps slowed. The pilot, who had spoken with dry humor and unshakable confidence, now moved like someone approaching an old friend. She placed her palm gently against the cool metal of the aircraft's flank. Ryan recognized that look instantly. It was the same look Marines had when touching the gates of their first base, the same look infantrymen had when running a hand across the scratched plates of their old MRAPs, a look that said, "You and I have survived things no one else can understand." "You know," she said quietly, eyes tracing the rivets along the fuselage, "most people don't ask me what my call sign means. They already know the story, or they pretend not to." He stepped closer, but kept respectful distance. "Why, Sticky?" she sighed, but it wasn't irritation, more like resignation, because during that mission, everything decided to break at once. Hydraulics blew, fuel was leaking, warning lights stuck on like Christmas, radios cut in and out. It was a sticky mess I shouldn't have gotten out of. "And 6?" he asked. "I had 6 Marines on that ridge." She said, "They were alive. That was all that mattered." Her tone wasn't dramatic, not heroic, just steady, solid, like she'd made peace with the chaos long ago. Ryan found himself looking at her with new eyes. She wasn't just brave, she was anchored, grounded in something most people never understood. "You don't talk about it." He asked gently. "I talk about it when it matters." She shrugged. "Mostly it doesn't." He shook his head. "You realize you could brag for the rest of your life, right?" She snorted. "About nearly dying, hard pass." He laughed despite himself. Every second he spent with her deepened his confusion in the best possible way. They started walking again, moving between aircraft shadows. "So," she said, "did you really think I'd have some dramatic call sign like Viper?" He winced. "I was trying to be charming. That explains why it didn't work." He pressed a hand to his chest. "Ouch, wounded." She held back a smirk. "Barely. Relax, Marine. I'm just giving you a hard time." "Is this retaliation?" he asked, for the assumption, maybe. She flipped her aviators up onto her head, finally revealing sharp hazel eyes. "But mostly because you walked up like you were auditioning for a recruitment poster." "In my defense," he began, "there is no defense." She cut in playfully, but it was entertaining. "Glad to be of service." He muttered, but he couldn't hide his smile. A silence settled, not awkward, not heavy, just steady, like they'd slipped into a rhythm neither had expected. The sunlight glinted off the A-10's cockpit canopy, and Ryan watched her gaze drift toward the sky, as if she was measuring something only pilots understood. "You miss it?" he asked, flying. She paused, "Always, but I don't miss that day, because it was terrifying." He guessed, "No." She shook her head, "Because it's the day people decided I was something more than I am." He wanted to tell her she was more. That courage like hers didn't come from skill alone, but he could see in her face that she didn't want to be placed on a pedestal. So instead, he nodded, quiet, respectful. She noticed his silence, and for a moment her expression softened. "You're different from most Marines I meet," she said. "Is that a compliment?" he asked carefully. "Depends," she replied, turning away. But he caught the tiny smile she tried to hide, and for the first time Ryan realized he wasn't just speaking to a legend. He was speaking to a person, someone sharp, someone humble, someone quietly extraordinary, and without meaning to, he felt his heartbeat shift, just a little, just enough to know he was in trouble. Evening settled slowly across the base, painting the world in warm gold and dusty orange. The noise of the day faded, fewer engines, fewer shouting commands, just the steady hum of generators and the distant thump of a helicopter winding down. Ryan found Elena's sticky six, leaning on the metal railing overlooking the runway. The sun dipped behind distant hangars, stretching long shadows across the concrete. A soft breeze lifted strands of her hair, making them dance around her face as she watched the A-10 silhouettes resting like sleeping beasts. He approached quietly, hands tucked into his pockets. "Didn't think pilots hung around the flight line after hours," he said gently. "Didn't think Marines cared enough to notice." She shot back, not turning, but the tease in her voice was unmistakable. He stepped beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I care." She finally looked at him, eyebrows raised. "About pilots, about you." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something he couldn't read yet. "Relax, Captain," she said softly. "I'm not here to intimidate you. That's the thing," he replied. "You kind of do." She smirked. "Good." He laughed, shaking his head. "You enjoy messing with me. You make it easy." Another breeze drifted past them, cool this time. Below them, maintenance crews finished up their tasks. A faint orange glow from the horizon highlighted the edges of the jets, giving the whole base a dreamlike ambience. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan cleared his throat. "Earlier today, when I asked your call sign, you could have told me right away." "No fun in that," she said simply. He turned toward her. "You weren't offended?" She scoffed. "If I got offended every time a Marine flirted with me with no idea who I was, I'd never get anything done. So you knew exactly what I was doing, from 10 steps away," she said, tapping the railing. "You have a very predictable swagger." He winced. "Predictable? That's brutal." "You asked." Silence fell again, but this one felt comfortable, the kind of pause where neither person is searching for an exit. They're waiting for the next moment to unfold naturally. "So," he finally said, "you always freeze Marines like that when they realize who you are. Only the cocky ones? And I qualify." "Oh, absolutely." He laughed once, but it wasn't the playful, exaggerated kind he often used. It was softer, honest. "You know," she said after a moment, her voice gentler. "You're different from what I expected." "What do you expect?" he asked. "A Marine who'd spend the rest of the day trying to impress me, or apologizing non-stop, or telling me he's my biggest fan. She nudged him with her shoulder. You did none of that. He shrugged. I just wanted to talk to you. Her eyes softened again. Yeah, she whispered. I noticed. She looked away, back toward the runway, the sky now shifting from orange to lavender. Her profile in that light was striking, calm, quiet, and powerful in a way that didn't demand attention but commanded it anyway. Ryan exhaled slowly. Can I ask you something personal? Depends, she said. Is it dumb? Probably, she chuckled. Then go ahead. He leaned a little closer, not too close, just enough to show sincerity. If I asked you to grab coffee sometime, would Sticky Six shoot me down? Her lips pressed together in what looked dangerously close to a smile. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at the horizon, her fingers lightly tapping the railing like she was calibrating something inside herself. Is that Captain Mercer asking? She said slowly, or the Marine who walked up to me with that stupid grin earlier today? He straightened his back, pulled the humor out of his voice, and said quietly, just me, no swagger, no jokes. She turned to him fully this time, her eyes, no sunglasses to hide behind, met his with a clarity that hit him harder than he expected. Her voice softened to something warm, almost unreadable. In that case, she said, coffee sounds nice. His chest tightened in the best possible way. Really, really, she confirmed, but if you show up with that grin again, I won't, he promised instantly. Good, she lifted an eyebrow. I like this version better. They stayed on the railing a few moments longer, no rush, no awkwardness, just the shared quiet of two people who had stumbled into something unexpected. As they walked off the flight line together, the last of the sunlight dipped away behind them. Ryan glanced at her, a legend, a mystery, a woman he'd met in the most chaotic, embarrassing way possible. And Elena Marlowe, Sticky Six, looked back with a small, genuine smile, the kind of smile that froze him just as much as her call sign had, maybe even more.